What's the word, everybody? Welcome into a new edition of the By the Horns podcast. And you know that we are presented by Toyota. And Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. So find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. Cam Smith rocking with my man Drew Stevens of the Bigs. It's been a little minute since we tapped in with everybody, but hopefully you tapped into our previous podcast, 𝗵𝗍 insider Casey Johnson, one-on-one with the man in the middle, Bill Cartwright, NBA champion, so many different things that he was able to do in his NBA career on the court. But then also you got some insight into Bill Cartwright's life off the court as well. So if you haven't listened to that conversation, I encourage you to go listen to it because it is that great. All right, Drew, let's catch everybody up that maybe hasn't been paying attention to what's been going on with this Bulls team. Now, as I mentioned, it's been a little while since we tapped in with everyone with this group, and our last podcast was after that Clippers win, a very impressive Clippers win, especially seeing how this team played that Sunday night against the Portland Trail Blazers. Tail end of a back-to-back. They showed up, showed out, especially the bench who stepped up, and so many different guys. But when you look at the previous games, the previous handful of games since that Clippers win, Adam Amin said this on the broadcast the other night with this Bulls team. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde effect, and even Zach LaVine said it post-game as well, that you just never know what team is going to show up. And Zach said it to say, quote, it's a confusing team. Like, we're a confusing team. And that's really the best way to describe this Bulls season, where they have some marquee wins. They've beaten the Boston Celtics at TD Garden. They've beaten the Knicks twice, once at the Garden, once at the United Center on Derrick Rose night. Then you see earlier this week, you beat one of the best teams, another one of the best teams in the NBA, in the Denver Nuggets. You put up 129 points against them. And then you have those setback losses to the Atlanta Hawks and to the Washington Wizards and the Charlotte Hornets. And, you know, we saw the Philadelphia 76ers last Saturday inside of the United Center. But just you have some glimpse of what it could be moving forward, especially off of this week, because Billy Donovan, who has been more than a protector for Patrick Williams, and we understand that Patrick Williams has gone through his struggles this year. A lot of people, obviously, that are Bulls fans, people in the media are questioning, you know, should Patrick Williams be moved? Should he still be in that starting rotation? What's the future looking like for a guy that's in the first year of a 5-year, $90 million deal? And as much as Billy Donovan preaches and believes and really exemplifies continuity and chemistry and having that same starting group, his hand was forced, and he had to move away from Patrick Williams in the starting lineup. And Patrick Williams came into the Nuggets game in a reserve role for the first time this season. He was healthy. Nothing was an issue with him in terms of his physical health, but it was just more a move for Billy Donovan that had to be made, Drew, and really it paid dividends. So you swap out Pat Will, you swap in Ayo Dosunmu. Both of these guys really had one of their better games of the season when you look at their production against Denver.
Yeah, Billy Donovan kind of talked about how it served two purposes. Obviously, it was an opportunity for P. Will to be put in a different responsibility, different role on the team. But it also was a case of trying to match minutes with Aaron Gordon, who has been coming off the bench for the Nuggets. So every time Aaron Gordon made his way to the scores table, P. Will, for the most part, if not for every part, did so as well. So it just so happened to fall in that pocket of games where P. Will wasn't playing very well, and here comes the Denver Nuggets, who aren't starting their, power forward, ultra built four. You know what I'm saying? So it served two purposes, and I think that was outside of the amount of threes that the Bulls hit in that game, and obviously beating the Nuggets. Patrick Williams coming in off the bench and Billy Donovan trying to shake things up was obviously the story of that game. You spoke to how confusing this team can be, how Zach has talked about they can beat certain teams one night and lose to other teams on others. I get that, and I'm not trying to say that they aren't right in saying that, but to me, it has a lot to do with just the shooting variance. We know this is a team that wants to get up threes, even when they're not falling. old school mentality is when your shot's not falling, you want to kind of get into the paint, make things happen at the rim. But we've seen earlier in the season in games where they have not shot the ball well, and after the game, Billy Donovan will say, "Nah, we want to stay and play with our identity," hoping that eventually shots will fall. So the shooting variance, I think, plays a large role in both the major victories that they've gotten this season and some of the losses that they get. And we also know that this team has a tendency to not play as well, maybe not as connected, maybe not as focused on the defensive side of the ball when their shots aren't falling. Heard players and coaches talk about it this season, seasons past. So it's just a lot of familiar traits that go into this season. I know that this is one in which they are obviously playing a different style of basketball, but we're seeing some of those same things turn up with this team. In the month of January, opposing teams are averaging like 20.5 points off turnovers. Yeah. So that's kind of come back to rear its ugly head. They're also giving up, I want to say, 17 points, second chance points this month. Both of those two numbers or figures are the highest of the season in terms of month-to-month averages. So, again, guys have been in and out of the lineup. Bulls haven't always shot the ball well. Obviously, they're not going to do that on a night-to-night basis, and we've seen them kind of lose their way here in some games where those old things that they have a control over, taking care of the basketball, taking care of the defensive glass, just haven't been there on some of these nights and some of these games that they've ended up losing.
Yeah, it's the inconsistencies of this group that have you scratching your head. Like, okay, you put it together one night, you don't have it the other night. And sometimes you can understand that with it being an 82-game season and is the NBA. But at the same time, there is a thing with Billy Donovan, you touched on it, Drew, where they know what they have to be night in, night out to, one, keep themselves within ball games, and also two, win ball games. It has to be a team that has to be high volume with assists, right? When we've seen them do that, whether it's 25, possibly even 30 or 35 or more, this team is on the winning side. When they're shooting a high clip from three and making a certain amount, at least 20, then this is a team that has a good chance of winning games or have won games with those numbers. So Billy Donovan understands that, hey, guys, we know when we drive the lane and we leave our feet to pass and it results in a turnover, and that leads into a fast break point and then also points off turnovers, we're starting to dig ourselves a grave. And that was evident on a number of different losses, especially in this last 10 where you saw this Bulls team drop 8 of those 10 games. But you want to make sure that with the leadership that's in place, with Zach LaVine, with Nikola Vucevic, with Lonzo Ball, Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, like these are guys that have proven themselves in the league. There has to be some sort of, I'm not going to say players only meeting, I'm not going to do that, but also there has to be some type of agreement with this group, with the ball handlers, to say we cannot allow ourselves to get into these leave our feet past the ball situations, because it results in teams getting out and running, getting them comfortable in ball games, especially as a road team, allowing them to open their offense up, right? I mean, how many times have we heard this, Drew, when you're a hooper and if you're a scorer, especially if you're having a tough night shooting the basketball or just a tough start shooting the basketball, the recipe is get to the lane, maybe get fouled, get to the free throw line. You get to the free throw line, that's what would allow you to kind of get comfortable shooting and scoring the basketball. Well, for opponents for the Bulls, when they start off slow offensively, they turn their defense into offense with those fast break points, with those points off turnovers. Those live ball turnovers have been costly for this Bulls team as well, and are a direct result of why we see those fast break points and points off turnovers. But they're allowing other teams to get comfortable in ball games. And now you're setting yourself up for failure, because not only have teams figured out, okay, how to guard you, because if I know a certain player is going to drive, and if he drives too deep, or we put a big that's going to just not even try and block a shot, but at least try to jump up with the arms spread up high or try and alter a shot, this team is going to leave their feet to pass. And when they do that, Everyone needs to find and locate the basketball because it could be coming your way and you can lead to a break. So it's those things that are a continuous work in progress. And I'm sure at this point in the season for Billy Donovan, he's like, look, you're trying my patience, but you know what? I'm a professional head coach, and we know that this is not Billy's first rodeo, and that is no pun intended because they used to call him Billy the Kid over at Providence College. But you have to, again, understand who you are as a basketball team, what that identity is, what that good identity is, what that bad identity is. And if you can stay away from the bad identity and really work on and rep the good parts of your game, then you can start to string together wins for this group. But the month of January has been rough for this team. As I mentioned, the last 10 games, they dropped 8 of those games. I mean, the previous loss that we saw the other night against the Boston Celtics, don't want to dive into that too much, but you had some positives coming out of that game. And really the past couple of games, we talked about Patrick Williams and what he was able to do against the Denver Nuggets. He actually showed up and played well against the Boston Celtics again in that reserve role. But Matas Buzelis is the guy that we've seen back-to-back games in that 6-man role, first guy off the bench for Billy Donovan. Drew, we're coming to a place in time where we're going to get to the NBA trade deadline conversation and possibly how this team could look after February 6th, which is the NBA trade deadline. There could be a time where we can see Matas Buzelis consistently in that starting lineup. And if you're moving forward and he's one of those building blocks for a future team, and we've heard Matas say this post-game, Drew, after the Celtics loss, that the only way in his mind to get better is to put him against better competition and having him on the court so he can, not in Matas's words, but more so in my words, have his iron sharpened. Iron sharpens iron, right? So you want to have this guy that mentally feels that he belongs, physically not there yet, especially on the defensive end. He's still a rookie, still 20 years old, so he's still learning the tricks and trades of those things in terms of just a physicality standpoint of the game. But mentally, you can see the strides that he's been able to make in his time with this Bulls team in his first few months as an NBA pro, Drew.
It's a process, right? You know, he was one way at the start of the season, another way 2 months in. Now he's something completely different. As we sit here and discuss this on January 30th, you know, he's growing, he's learning. I know he's not getting as much time as a lot of fans hope that he would have, but, you know, Billy Donovan is trying to juggle a lot in terms of trying to win games and who he trusts, and also trying to bring Matas along in the way that he thinks is the best for his development.
Yeah.
But I definitely have seen Matas grow. His quote the other night about, you know, wanting to play against the best and that being the only way for him to get better. I would expect nothing less from Matas, having spoken with him and seeing kind of his demeanor and just his mindset. Like, he wants to take on those challenges. It was good to see him kind of start off slow, but Billy Donovan allowed him to stay in that game with 3 fouls. He continued to be aggressive.
Yeah.
He seemed to learn from his mistakes. He stayed with his shot. And I know
better closing out against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, like another block for Matas. He leads the Bulls in blocks. Like, I know Matas isn't doing this, but when you talked about just him and wanting to get back into the ball game and wanting to play more because that's how you get better. We all know that is just, you know, anybody. It doesn't have to be sports, but if you surround yourself with people that are better than you or are smarter than you in certain rooms and you're having these conversations, you can learn from them and get better on your own right. But I'm thinking about the movie Friday Night Lights, where, you know, when, like, you know, he's talking to his coach and he's just like, you know, if you want to win, put Booby in. You know, I want to spin, you know, Booby Miles character. But not saying, again, that Matas isn't saying that to Billy, but it's also that mentality. Like, look, put me in a game. Let me just rock. Let me do my thing. Let me learn through fire. Let me allow you to show some things that I can do. But you're starting to see that corner being turned just slightly for Billy Donovan and giving more minutes to Matas. And it's because he's been better on the defensive end. He's been better with cutting off of the basketball and just attacking the offensive glass as well.
He's trusting him more, right? Matas has been a 6-man 2 games in a row. I know that he's not locking up possession after possession as the primary defender on like a Jason Tatum or a Jaylen Brown, but there's been possessions where he's been matched up against pretty good ball handlers, and he's held his own. Most recently in that game against Boston, there were times where he was guarding Jason Tatum and he was staying in front of him. He did not let Tatum drive the basketball. Like I said, I know players aren't attacking every time they have the ball, so you got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but it was nice to see. I think maturing, not for Matas, but just in a sense of a basketball observer, is realizing that help defense can be just as hard as man-to-man defense, especially in the NBA when you're the low man and you got to pull and you got to rotate and you got to communicate. Yeah. Like coming to realize that for a lot of fans, I think is key. We talk a lot about guys who are great on-ball defenders who can slither their way through screens, who don't need help at all, but there's a lot to be said about guys who are good help defenders or just team defenders and can play within the concept. And I think that is something that kind of encourages me or interests me about where the tandem of Patrick Williams and Matas Buzelis might go in the future, just because of their length, the way that they can play defense. It's exciting in that regard in and of itself. But no, man, Matas has been playing. He's been hooping, and you've seen him start to get more minutes. He's kind of moved up in the rotation past Julian Phillips. As we said, 2 games in a row being the first guy off the bench, like that means something, So you hope to see that continue to carry on. I think if I have if I had any gripes about anything, it would be that Matas has been playing pretty well defensively in terms of his ability to block shots and to protect the rim. And on this team that is somewhat devoid of on-ball defenders, at certain times, guys being in and out of the lineup, like you would think that, maybe that would be something you want to inject more often into this game to see if you can use Matas's help defense to help kind of cover some of the weaknesses on this team. But again, Billy's bringing him along the way that he feels like he should, and we're starting to kind of see that growth, and it's been fun to watch.
Look, it's one thing, like you said, to be an on-ball defender, but it's another thing to be a help defender. Just so for people with some insight into what that entails, especially from the weak side in a league that is so heavy with ball screens and pick and rolls, especially the high pick and rolls, because if you're on that weak side or help side and your responsibility is to be the tagger for that rolling big, and most of the time you're not going to have a big that's going to roll unless you're having a guy like, I'm just thinking about the young boy from Charlotte Hornets, Williams,
Mark
big kid. Mark Williams, there we go, Mark Williams, who had a hell of a game against the Bulls. Unless it's a guy like Mark Williams or maybe a DeAndre Ayton that's not going to fully roll to the rim, most bigs now in the NBA are going to pick and pop, obviously like Vooch or Jokic. Even Jokic will run dive after a ball screen. But it's so difficult for a guy on the help side like Matas on the wing to go middle and tag a big. And then when that ball is reversed back out, possibly to your man, or you're having to have or be the second catch or the second person that closes out, it's difficult because you got to have guys where that ball is being swung that can knock down threes. And so you have to time those closeouts. And that's where scouting report comes into of, okay, where do they like to shoot their threes? What is their percentage from certain areas of the floor in terms of the wing? Are they better on the right wing? Are they better on the left wing? How should I close out? Matas is 6'10", so he can't overrun his closeouts because it might make it a little bit more difficult for him to, once he maybe overcloses out, to try and recover and get a block. And he's done a good job of being able to block shots. As I mentioned, he leads the Bulls in blocks this season, which is really impressive, and especially among rookies, one of the best in that category. But that insight there and the effort that's required to be that type of guy, to tag, to rotate out, to control ball handlers, to contest shots, that's an entire job in itself. And that's just one defensive trip. So to continue to do that for a guy that's 20 years old, that's still learning the game. Again, remember, he was in the G League and before that at Sunrise Christian, the prep school in Kansas. So this is all new to him. But again, He's a student of the game. He's watching film. He's talking to his vets. He's talking to guys that understand that we have a young dude that wants to get better. He's putting in the work in the gym. He's watching film. So let me just bless him with some nuggets to help him come along. And you're starting to see that. So that trust factor that you pointed out with Billy Donovan, with Matas, is definitely being shown. So that's getting us to this conversation about February 6th, because the NBA trade deadline is pulling up, and we hinted towards it the past few podcasts, and even the last podcast that myself and Drew were on, we dove into what possibly could be out there with this Bulls team when it comes to names like 𝗵liche Vucevic with Zach LaVine, throw in Lonzo Ball. You can throw in Josh Giddey as well. I mean, I don't know if you want to throw in Ayo and Kobe White in there, but we will do that as well, because you have a team, as CHSN Bulls insider Casey Johnson mentioned throughout this season, that the Bulls are open for business. So if you're open for business, then you don't have too many pieces that are untouchable. So when you look at the situation of this Bulls group, Drew, heading into February 6th, and again, we have 4 games for this Bulls team before we hit that trade deadline. You have Friday night against the Toronto Raptors in Toronto. You have Sunday against the Pistons in Detroit. Then you come back home Tuesday against the Miami Heat, and you have a back-to-back against the Minnesota Timberwolves on Wednesday night in Minnesota. Do you think when we get to, I'm not even going to push it up to February 5th, do you think that something happens Monday after the Detroit Pistons game that we could see a different looking Bulls team with new faces in new places?
I don't. I think if something happens, it's going to be right up on the deadline, just because the haggling between GMs, reported haggling, like, I think that's not going to resolve itself until teams are like up against the wall and they have to make decisions about, am I going to let this guy go for this amount, or am I going to do it for what I wanted to from day one when I was negotiating with this other GM? Like, I think this is going to be that 11th hour type of scenario for.
Do we get a situation where maybe during warm-ups or shoot-around that you start to see videos of certain guys like dapping up teammates and then, you know, the long embrace and then them walking off the court? Because we have seen that before in all of sports, right? You know, when these trade deadlines happen, whether it's the NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, like guys in the dugout, especially MLB, like are dapping each other up like, man, you know what? It's been fun, but I'm out. Could we possibly see that in Minnesota Wednesday night with this Bulls team? As you mentioned, like, things could come down to sometimes the final hour, but maybe even the day before, that night, with this Bulls group of certain guys dapping up teammates, and you just see them walking off, or they get the DNP, coach's decision, attached to their name on the box score. Maybe.
I don't think it'll be one of those things where, in terms of the dap ups, like a player knowing he's gone. I think it'll be more like, man, in case I don't see you on the other side.
Yeah, it could be that.
One of those. Maybe one of those. But
go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You got it.
No, I was gonna say, like, that, and that's the interesting thing for me of, if it gets to the final hour with this team of having to move pieces, for those that are on the side of this Bulls team should trade Vooch and Zach and a number of different names and contracts, you get concerned, because my stance is I'd rather see players or moves being made maybe that Monday, possibly even that Tuesday, before you get to that final hour of the trade deadline, because now we're starting to, for me, raise my antennas on, could the Bulls get anything for what they have on their roster? Like, are these contracts harder to trade than we initially thought? Like, we know going into this trade deadline that certain contracts are tough to move off of, but also at the same time, what are these relationships with these front offices with this Bulls team, right? And I know that they've been on the phones. We've talked about this, and obviously Zach LaVine has spoke on this with his name being involved in trade rumors, and obviously we talked about it a little bit ago of Casey Johnson saying the Bulls are open for business. So that front office of 𝗵liche and 𝗵𝗿ci are working the phones. What and when will this deal happen? And that's my thing, looking at how, as we get closer to the trade deadline, of what this Bulls team will look like.
I'm going to throw a caveat out there now that I've had a second to think about it. I think we'll see something happen before the deadline. Like in your mind, you were saying maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week. Only if the Jimmy Butler scenario / saga /
look, man, look that is petty versus petty. Is Pat Riley versus Jimmy, and ultimately Jimmy is going to lose that because Pat Riley holds the cards, and I get it. Like this is a thing with Jimmy Butler now, and I am all for player empowerment. But when you have a track record that Jimmy has, starting in Chicago, how that situation went down. We go to Minnesota, how that situation went down. You go to Philly, how that situation goes down. And now it's rinse and repeat with another NBA franchise. And Jimmy just basically saying, I don't care where I go. I just don't want to be in Miami and play basketball for the Miami Heat. Well, we've seen Pat Riley exercise his pettiness. Cool. You feel that way? You're saying these things in the media? Well, guess what? I'm going to suspend you. You're not going to make this money. He's cost himself at least $3 million, and that total continues to go up and up. And Jimmy's like, all right, cool. Well, I'm going to be late to team planes. You tell me I'm not starting at shoot around, and 𝗵𝗻 is going to start in front of me. And you say that amongst the entire team, and that's coming from Erik Spoelstra. Yeah, I'm going to walk off and be petty and stomp out of the shoot around. Cool. Pat Riley's like, all right, I'll be petty again. I'll suspend you indefinitely. And then I'll ultimately pull the big choker card and send you somewhere where you probably won't even be remembered in terms of having an impact in the NBA with your new team. Not saying that I'm erasing everything that Jimmy Butler has done in his career, but Pat Riley has the power, if he wants, to be petty enough to say, you know what? I'm going to send you to the Portland Trail Blazers. I'm going to send you to the Pacific Northwest for this team that has some young pieces, looking at what their trade capital is, try and get some of that back, and just stick you in the Pacific Northwest in the Western Conference. Well, it is damn near like walking through hell with gasoline draws on, trying to make the play-in. I'm not even talking the playoffs, but the play-in the West. So I'm with you that being the first domino to fall, we can wait for that. But knowing Pat Riley, man, he's called the Godfather for a reason. He will definitely wait up until the final 5 minutes of the deadline for a deal that's probably already been done weeks in advance and say, you know what, Jimmy, I'm sending you to the Portland Trail Blazers. There you go.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Those are two strong-willed guys who don't want to budge an inch, and I think both of them have had some missteps up until this point, even Riley himself. But I brought that up because I think that's the deal that if it's going to happen between Miami and Phoenix, there has to be more teams involved. So because of that, that's why I threw that caveat on. If that domino falls, then maybe we see something happen with the Bulls before this time next week, Thursday, before the 2:00 Central Standard Time trade deadline. But
and also Golden State. Sorry, Judah, but I have to add this and to add to your point of that first domino of Jimmy falling. It has to fall for things to really open up. But the Golden State Warriors are a team that's still interested in Jimmy Butler. I know they don't want to pay that amount that he's worth because the Golden State Warriors are always in the luxury tax and overpaying for the roster that they have. But still, we've heard Nikola Vucevic and the potential of him being traded to Golden State. So if the Warriors don't go the Jimmy Butler route, maybe Vooch is the option for them. So I hear what you're saying, especially with Jimmy being the first domino to fall to make everything start to move before the trade deadline.
Or Zach, too. The latest report from the Athletic was that they're kind of Golden State, that is kind of weighing between Jimmy and Zach, and Vooch is kind of like a secondary option that they could look toward after they make a decision on what they want to do with those first two guys, or if something happens with Jimmy before they get a chance to make that swing. So it's going to be interesting, man, to see where things fall here between now and Thursday. I know that in my mind, there are at least 2 or 3 players that I feel like this front office needs to move on from, just in terms of asset management. And at this point, it's not even so much about ensuring that they keep this top 10 protected pick. I think they'll do that. Obviously, they'll have different odds depending on where they finish, but I think they'll finish with one of the 10 worst records in the league. Now it's about also helping to plot a course for next season and season after that, and making sure that you can trade some of these guys who aren't a part, who don't figure to be a part of your long-term future, and get something back for them so that you can either use those assets in the draft or use it to trade for other players here down the line. And the 2 or 3 players that I have in mind are 𝗗liche 𝗶𝗹, Lonzo Ball, and Torrey Craig. I know Torrey Craig's dealing with an injury, so I'm not sure how that's going to affect his market or a team wanting to take him on in addition to another player. But, these are guys that I feel like should not be on this roster past February 6th for all the reasons that I just stated. Lonzo Ball, I have said before, a lot of people have said before, he is the comeback story of this season in terms of the NBA. He is one of the best stories of this team. But I worry about his injury history. And because he's played so well, you wonder if maybe you can, get a team to take a swing on him, because we've seen him. He started with the last 3 or 4 games. He's playing upwards of 25, 26 minutes. He
had a season high the other night, 18 points against the Denver Nuggets. So,
he delivers an impactful punch pretty much whenever he's on the court, even though his shot is not falling the way that we saw it fall his last healthy season. So you've got to be able to protect the assets that you have right now, and again, plot a course for next season or the season after that, and make sure that you're putting yourself in the best position possible to assemble the kind of team that you want to be, and you said you wanted to have when you took this job to be the general manager, the executive vice president of basketball operations for this organization. Like, there's things that you can do here to kind of set you up in a better way. And I hope that comes to pass. I hope that they don't chase this play-in tournament that they have been kind of glued to these last couple of seasons, and kind of just look farther ahead, and again, just try to set themselves up for a brighter future.
Yeah, and this front office is tired of being stuck in the middle. And this is something that they've expressed. This is a front office. This is a franchise that is competitive, that wants to remain competitive. But it's one of those things in the NBA. You can't be stuck in limbo, right? It's either you're a team in hell or you're a team in heaven. And heaven is one of those top 6 spots, having a realistic chance of making your conference finals, of making the NBA finals, and winning an NBA championship. But if you're stuck in limbo, if you're stuck in purgatory, that is a place you don't want to be. And that middle section is where the Bulls are. So I love that you put that they have to make these moves for the setup, for their future, for these assets, to move off of certain contracts, to make it even more enticing for teams to come to the negotiation table so they can continue to grow and better this team for seasons to come. So a lot of different moves in store for this Bulls team. Hopefully that front office for sure is making sure that they're doing everything in their power to put the Bulls in the best position to where we don't have to be in the play-in anymore. We can talk about a team that's top 6 in the NBA. And I don't want to do this, Drew, but you have teams in the NBA that last season, a couple seasons ago, we weren't talking about them being in the top 6. One in the Western Conference and definitely one in the Eastern Conference. And I'm not trying to compare this Bulls team and say, hey, we should be more like them. But you have examples out there in the NBA for teams that have set themselves up for their future, went to the negotiation table at the trade deadline, traded for certain guys, signed certain guys in the offseason that changed the trajectory of their franchises. And now they're not stuck in basketball hell or basketball purgatory. They're in basketball heaven, where they're in that top 6 of their respective conference, and they have a legit chance of being in the conference finals. So that's the task ahead for this team. Other teams are trying to do that. Obviously, we talked about what the Miami Heat are trying to do in the play-in right now, trying to move off of Jimmy Butler. They got another situation going on, and it's all allegations right now. But Terry Rozier and the whole federal investigation going on with him, with the supposed gambling, allegedly, with Jontay Porter and being involved in that. So we'll keep our eyes on that situation. Zion Williamson with his comments today on what the Pelicans situation is, of him physically himself, in Zion's words, he can play back-to-backs, but he said, and I quote, I work for the Pelicans. And so the Pelicans don't feel that it's smart for him to play back-to-backs. Do you think that Zion gets traded? Do you think that a team can push a lot of their capital, of their contracts, of their pieces to make it work for a dude that I believe is on the Supermax? Am I correct with Zion, or is he just on the max deal?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think we see anybody trade for him before this February 6th trade deadline. But to be honest with you, I'm I'm not mad at the Pelicans, though. I'm not mad. Like, because of the season that they've had, the injuries that they've endured.
Side note, sorry to cut you off. I had to look it up. Designated rookie extension. That's what Zion is on. So, but 5-year, $197 million. That's what he signed for the Pelicans. So that's the deal that he's on. I had to look that up to make sure that we got right for the streets, and the streets knew what we were doing on this.
No, right on. But no, they're not in a position where they need to be forcing him to play back-to-backs. What's the use in that? So I get it from their standpoint. They're trying to, again, protect Zion, protect their chief asset moving forward. To me, there's no reason to push the pedal to the metal on this season when you're already pretty much you're done for in terms of the Western Conference. They're so far back in the standings that it doesn't make sense to really push him to push the team for what, at this point. They'd be hard pressed to probably even make the play-in tournament. No, I don't fault them at all for holding him out of back-to-backs, trying to make sure that he stays as healthy as he can, and kind of use maybe this season as a springboard with a lottery pick in hand going into next season, and we'll see what happens with Brandon Ingram. Yeah,
it's a situation for the Pelicans, and not only Brandon Ingram, but 𝗵𝗂, right? I mean, you have a situation with guys that, especially for a guy like CJ, and you can throw Brandon Ingram in that too, where they're at the point in their career where it's like, all right, I don't want to play meaningless basketball. I want to play meaningful basketball and compete in a playoff series with legitimate chances of winning a ring. And both of those players can add to a championship team, no doubt about it, especially a guy like Brandon Ingram with his scoring prowess and how he's been able to really elevate his game every single season. And 𝗵𝗂, every team needs shooting in the NBA, but you have a guy that can switch off from the point guard to the shooting guard spot, knock down shots to just bring that veteran leadership and just poise to a locker room that every team needs, right? So they have some pieces that they can move off of in the Pelicans. I mean, what you're looking at is one of the worst teams, not only in the Western Conference, but also the NBA. And I think that's part of just the rash of injuries that were hit with very early on in the season that really put them in a bad spot and just never been able to dig themselves out of that hole. So they're going to be one of the teams for sure that I can see be busy before the February 6th trade deadline, along with some other teams as well. But you talk about Zion, and it's a two-time All-Star, Drew, 2021, 2023. And we have it official with the 2025 NBA All-Stars. So let's get into this conversation, man, because as you know, with All-Stars, there's always going to be snubs. There's always going to be a situation where people feel that certain guys should have made it, certain guys shouldn't have made it. But let's go into what we have right now when it comes to starters for each conference. So you're looking at the Eastern Conference. Is there anybody in that starting five for you that shouldn't have been an Eastern Conference starter? So Jalen Brunson of the Knicks, Karl Anthony Towns of the Knicks, you have Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics, you have Donovan Mitchell of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and you know that man, 𝗵𝗂 𝗵𝗂 of the Milwaukee Bucks.
No, I feel like that starting five is solid. Maybe a case could be made for. Nah, I'm not even gonna go that far. No, man, those guys are kind of solidified, man. I don't know that you can make a strong enough argument for anybody who was named a reserve to be catapulted into that starting lineup. I think they got it right in terms of starting five in the East. What about you?
Yeah. No, I think they're spot on with that, especially with the Knicks getting two guys in the starting lineup. And it's more so about positions. You look at Jalen Brunson and what he's been able to do, and it's not just Jalen Brunson being one of the best guards in the Eastern Conference, but one of the best guards, according to some people, the best guard in the NBA. And you can make an even stronger case for him when it comes to MVP. I know Shea is getting all of the love, and he deserves it. Jokic is getting love as well, but I think voter fatigue jumps in with Jokic with the MVP award. Same thing can be said about Giannis, but that's not to diminish what they've been doing, because Jokic is putting himself with Wilt Chamberlain when it comes to records, which is ridiculous. And Giannis is just the Terminator. I've called him that for a long time, since really not even a long time, but since he just like had the from geek to chic body transformation. You remember Jenny Jones? I'm speaking to a certain crowd right now when she used to have those geek to chic episodes with that. It feels like that's what Giannis has transformed himself into, and really a Terminator type dude since he's added that bulk and just that this power to his game. But you can't make a case for a reserve for the East to swap out for a starter in the East. You just can't do it. It's the same thing with Jason Tatum as well. So that starting five for the Eastern Conference solidified, no doubt.
Absolutely.
But now let's get into something, because you got certain guys on the Eastern Conference reserve, and this is for NBA coaches in the East. They pulled for these guys. They voted for these guys. So let's just throw out some names from the East. As a matter of fact, not even just throw out some names. Let's throw out the 7 remaining names to fill that 12-man roster for the Eastern Conference All-Stars. Jaylen Brown of the Boston Celtics, Cade Cunningham of the Detroit Pistons, Darius Garland of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Tyler Hero of the Miami Heat, Damian Lillard of the Bucks, Evan Mobley of the Cavs, and Pascal Siakam of the Pacers. Drew, one of these things are not like the other. One of these things, maybe 2 of these things, are not like the other. I'm going to pass the ball to you, man. Go ahead. Say your piece.
I'm guessing the one of these things not like other. The main thing that you're talking about is Tyler Hero. Am I mistaken?
Hey, no, you're not mistaken. Like what's going on? What's happening? What's going on? And again, this is not. I don't want people to listen to this wherever you're getting your pods. I don't want people watching this show, this pod on YouTube, on the CHSN network, to think that Cam and Drew are being haters. It's not that. But also, you have to make it make sense with certain guys being named as reserves over other guys that numbers-wise, production-wise, just status-wise of who they are and what they do, how they were left off and other guys are left on.
Yes, I don't have the raw numbers in front of me, but Tyler Hero is having a damn good season.
Yes, he is.
In the bubble, remember that meme, that facial expression he had? Like, yeah, that's this season. That's this season. And in the wake of all the issues that they've had with Jimmy Butler, Eric Spoelstra has kind of turned that team over to Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. And Tyler Hero is kind of carrying that offense. Bam Adebayo is struggling mightily offensively. Again, Jimmy Butler has lost his way or lost his affection, lost his love of basketball playing with the Miami Heat. So it's kind of Tyler Hero's show right now. And he got rewarded. First-time All-Star. Now, I will say there's 2 names that you did not mention, and they both played for our hometown team in Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic. I think that Zach has a bigger gripe than Vooch. Zach is one of only 4 players who are averaging at least 24 points, 4.5 assists, and shooting better than 40% from 3. He's going to be one of 2 who are not going to be in this game. Kyrie Irving is the other one. If there was anybody on this Eastern Conference team who I thought Zach maybe had a case over, it would probably be Tyler Hero. But I can't really get mad because even before you get to Zach LaVine, Tyrese Maxey has a case. Tyrese Halliburton has a case. Maybe even
LaMelo Ball.
Hey, so it's like you said to start this whole conversation, man. Like, these spots is not a lot of them. There's a lot of good players, a lot of great players in the NBA, and you really, 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 really have to be on your game to make one of these teams. I think record factors in a little bit. The player on the team with the worst record who made the All-Star team is Victor Wembanyama. We know he's pretty much the next face of the league, so you can kind of throw the record out of the window. Cade Cunningham is the other one. I think Detroit is a game under 500. The Bulls are sitting 8 games under 500 right now. And I think if nothing else, the biggest reason why we don't see Zach LaVine making it as one of these reserves is just because of what the season is for the Bulls, what the last couple of seasons have been for the Bulls. They just are not in the psyche of a lot of fans, unfortunately. We know that the United Center is packed on a pretty much night-to-night basis, but in the sense of the national consciousness, like the Bulls just aren't there right now. So people hear about these numbers with Zach LaVine, but I don't think that the spotlight is on them enough where they can see how well and just how damn good Zach LaVine has been as a scorer this year, as maybe the best leader we've seen him be this year, as a more willing defender this year. The eyes just have not been on him the way that they may have been if the Bulls were in a different position this season.
The only thing that I can say that coaches looked at and factored in when it got to, okay, you have Tyler Hero having a career year for himself. You compare the numbers to Zach LaVine or 𝗵𝗵 𝗟𝗶𝗍 or LaMelo Ball or Trae Young. The only thing, in my view, that I see why Tyler Hero got that spot on top of what he's been able to do individually is that the Miami Heat are 7th in the Eastern Conference. That's for me, you factor in the record part of it, right? It's a better record than the Atlanta Hawks. That's a better record than the Chicago Bulls, than the Sixers, and for damn sure the Charlotte Hornets. Like, I think that's always been the biggest thing with LaMelo, even though he has been an all-star before. But you only win 12 games. It's hard to put you in one of those 12 spots and say that you're deserving over this guy that maybe is in the top 6 or even the top 10 of your respective conference. So that's for me, looking at the situation with Tyler Hero, that someone can say, this is why we went with him, because he's on the team with his role. They have a better record. They have more wins. They're positioned better to be a playoff team. That's the only thing I can say. But if that's not the case, and you're just doing numbers and you're doing impact, come on, man. What are we doing, Drew? Zach LaVine should have been an all-star. But that's look, we only got so much time on this episode of By the Horns. And I know our producer, 𝗵𝗶 who does a phenomenal job with all of our podcasts on the Chicago Sports Network, is looking at me and listening right now like, Cam, y'all better wrap this up soon, because I don't know how I'm going to cut this thing. So we're working on the Edgar. We're trying to get that through it with you. But those are the starters and the reserves for the Eastern Conference. So unfortunately, no Zach LaVine. Unfortunately, no 𝗵𝗶 Vucevic, who I thought had a great case to be an NBA All-Star. In fact, over Zach LaVine, just with his numbers. And also when you look at when it comes to the bigs in the Eastern Conference after Karl Anthony Towns, there's no other center that you can point to that has put in more work, has been more efficient than 𝗵𝗶 Vucevic. It's a fact.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, he kind of gets steamrolled by the whole, we're going to have 2 more guards, 3 more front court players, and 2 wild cards. So you don't have to have another center in that mix there.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah, he just
And also, before we get to the West, like, look, expand the rosters. Come on now, let's expand the rosters. Come on, 24 spots is not enough, NBA. The NBA has expanded. You got more teams. You need more spots. Maybe a few more spots would be great. 15 per conference. That works, especially if you're doing all this 4-on-4 stuff. We'll see with this upcoming All-Star weekend in the Bay Area at Chase Center. So let's think about that. You're thinking about dropping quarters down from 12 minutes to 10 minutes, NBA Commissioner 𝗵𝗶. Let's expand the rosters. Let's do that first. Let's handle that.
I hear you on that. I'll be real quick because I know we gotta. Okay. I'll be real quick. I hear you on that, but I like that All-Star means something a little bit more. I don't want to extend it 3 more spots. Like, teams in the regular season, the playoffs, damn for sure are not going 15 deep. They barely go 12 deep. So I kind of like it staying at 12. And it's gonna be snubs if you even extend it out to 15. So I'm not mad at you wanting 𝗵𝗶 to extend the roster, but I kind of like it being 12. It means more. It means a little bit more.
Does it mean more? With how we've seen this era of All-Stars and how they play in competition level, does it really mean more? That's my thing, especially when you factor in fan voting and how that's 50% and it's basically a popularity contest. Again, it could be an entirely different pod just on this alone. But let's move over to the Western Conference All-Stars, man, because you're looking at obviously some familiar names when you have LeBron James, some controversy. Some people out there believe that Kevin Durant shouldn't have been an NBA All-Star, at least a starter. I'm not saying that. KD definitely deserves a spot. Obviously, you have Steph Curry, like LeBron and Steph. We're counting down those days, Drew, of just seeing those two dudes in All-Star games, and we've been so spoiled with having both of them in. So those three guys are in, and you're looking at a situation when it comes to the rest of the starters for the Western Conference. Anybody that for you stood out that possibly could have been swapped out for reserve? Is it, I'm not going to say 𝗚cie 𝗰𝗶𝗹, but is it a LeBron? Is it a Kevin Durant? Is it a Steph Curry? Is it a Nikola Jokic?
No, it's not a Jokic, but it is a LeBron James. It is LeBron James, with all due respect. And I don't remember if they were both listed as front court or guard, or you could list them at both or vote for them both. But
yeah,
maybe Anthony Edwards in for LeBron James. Again, that's, nitpicking maybe here and there, but it almost feels like a Lifetime Achievement Award. And if you go give us anybody, LeBron is going to get the Lifetime Achievement Award. He's put in, 21, 22 years of work. So I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. But I saw him starting, I was just a little bit surprised. But again, fan vote, you never know how that's going to shake out.
Yeah. Popularity contest. Yeah. I'm just going to swap out fan vote for popularity contest when it comes to that. So let's get to the reserves of the West, man. Anthony Davis of the Lakers, Anthony Edwards, as you mentioned, who's going to be reserved for the West. You have James Harden, Jaren Jackson Jr., and those are two names where people are like, could somebody else get those spots? Maybe like a 𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏. Alperen Şengün of the Rockets gets his first time as an NBA All-Star. Victor Wembanyama, as you mentioned, Spurs record-wise, not one of the best in the NBA, but Wemby gets that spot on the All-Star group. And then we finish it off with Jalen Williams of the OKC Thunder. Are you looking at the situation for the West where there are more possible snubs than what we saw in the East? Because I don't know what it is with the NBA, with NBA fans, with Western Conference coaches, but this is back-to-back years of 𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗏 not being snubbed, because I don't think snub is a strong enough word. It's being disrespected of not being an NBA All-Star. Like, what else does this man have to do for his season, for his team, to be awarded an NBA All-Star spot in the Western Conference? I don't know what it is. I'm going to extend this podcast another hour if I go on my rant, Drew. So I'm just going to graciously and humbly pass the ball over to you and go ahead and do your thing.
That was the name that surprised me that was left off. That was the first one that kind of hit me in the forefront of my mind. And I got to admit that I think it just has to go back to team record. He's being passed over by Jaren Jackson Jr., Alperen Şengün, two guys whose teams have better record than his. Then you have Jalen Williams. I think obviously he's having a good season.
Right.
And you're rewarding the Oklahoma City Thunder with two players from their team. And of course, Victor Wembanyama has to be in the All-Star game just because of who he is, what he represents. Like, he is a freak of nature. We call it an alien when he and the Spurs were in town. Like, he obviously was going to be in the game, but I was surprised about Alperen Şengün getting in. A little bit about James Harden. I've seen a lot of back and forth online already about if he was deserving of it, and people
saying that he stole a spot from his own teammate Norman Powell, who's the leading scorer for the Clippers. So
Norman Powell is probably the leading beneficiary of James Harden, because a lot of Norman Powell's buckets are from James Harden or off of James Harden's assists. So it's, again, man, it's gonna be gripes every year with this All-Star game with who selected, who snubbed. So this is just another story, another chapter in a long line of what will be snubs for this game.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. Look, man, if I was NBA commissioner, and if you're not in the top 10 spots of your respective conference, since this play-in thing is involved, if we didn't have the play-in, if you're not in the top 8 spots of your conference, you don't get an All-Star spot. I'm that's just how I rock. I think you have to have one-on-one record. I think you have to be in a position to be in the playoffs, because you're basically putting a pause on the season, and it's the best 24 players in the first half of the season or leading in an All-Star break. That's just me. I'm not NBA commissioner, though. His name is Adam Silver. He's thinking about changing the 4 quarters to, instead of 12 minutes to 10 minutes. I'm not rocking with that, because you start doing that, you're going to get a 4-point line. You're going to get so many different other gimmicks. And we don't have time for that, because we literally have to end this podcast right now, because I know �奧𝗶 𝗟𝗶 is definitely about to blow us up in our mentions and with our text messages. Like, why the hell did y'all do that to me? So with that said, for my man Drew Stevens, I'm Cam Smith. Thank you for rocking with us on a very extended version of the By the Horns podcast, and we're presented by Toyota. And know that Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. So find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. We'll see everybody soon. Thanks for rocking with us.